Good afternoon. It's Monday again. It rolls around every 7 days, doesn't it? Whether we like it or not. Are your dreams of becoming a writer, a speaker, or an artist coming true? When we know that we've been called to deliver God's message and we obey, we anticipate success, whatever that means to us, don't we? And we can work sacrificially for Christ for years without reality matching our expectations. Hello, Robbie. So good to see you today. If you're feeling hopeless about your future as a Christian writer, speaker, or artist, my guest today has insights to help. Hi, I'm Patricia Durgan, the Christian Message Coach, and this is Marketers on Mission. We present marketing tutorials and interviews by and for Christian writers, speakers, and artists. I think I've said that enough times now in the intro. 3 times is enough. This is episode number 151. Are you feeling hopeless about the future? You may be grieving the past with Dee Lundgren. Hello, Dee. How are you today?
Hey, Patricia. Good to see you.
It's a pleasure to have you. I'm glad that you were able to squeeze us in because I know it's a little crazy there at the office today.
It's a little crazy. We're in the office right now.
You've been a pastor's wife for decades, and you've been a professional licensed grief counselor for almost 15 years. So you've heard lots and lots of stories of heartache and loss, and just rip your heart out kind of information from different people, most of them whom you cared about. But that, even though that's true, that's not why you specialized in this field. You have your own story to tell, don't you?
Yes, I do. About 11 years ago, I lost my oldest son to suicide. He had battled bipolar disorder, and then he did commit suicide. And so that plunged me into the whole grief thing. I had counseled people for grief issues before. I really didn't know what I was doing. Now that I look back at it. Yeah. And so now I know it from a personal level. When God allows something that you really thought he would never allow, that's really when you're plunged into the grief.
And I know that a lot of people think of grief, when they hear the word grief, they immediately equate that to there's been a death. And that's certainly true most of the time. But there are lots and lots of ways. You say that grief also encompasses deep loss.
Yes. Sometimes we don't acknowledge it as grief issues. It could be like a loss of a dream. I remember when we went to seminary, there was this man that went to seminary along with my husband. He was a dentist. And so he quit his dental profession. He went to seminary. Of course, you don't make any money going to seminary. You pay money going to seminary. And he had a family. And he was going to start this ministry, and he took some of the money that he made when he was practicing dentistry, and he built a home. Well, this home, they moved into the home, and cracks started appearing everywhere. So he contacted the builder, and the builder, it turns out, his dream home, well, it wasn't really a dream home, but his home that he built was built on a landfill. And because the builder was the head of this builders association, he was never able to recoup his money. So here you have this man leaving everything to go to seminary, and then you have this type of thing happen. And that can really throw you because you just don't expect that God's going to lead you into something like that. So that's certainly a loss that needs to be grieved, needs to be processed.
And first it needs to be acknowledged and identified even before that step. Is that right?
Yes. The first thing you need to know is that this is some type of a loss. It's a loss in finances, a loss what you thought God would do, a loss of where you thought you would live. So these type of losses are very, very common. The older you get, the more these losses start to come into play.
Yes. I've experienced deep losses the first 20 years of my life, and then last year my husband and I had, in the last 5 years, we've had an ongoing issue, not between ourselves, but in a business. And last year we closed the business, and the loss was just devastating on almost every level, and we were plunged into that grief period, not knowing You never know how. That's the thing. Part of the mystery. That's the negative. You don't know how long that period is going to last. You have to go through the process. Whether you're a Christian or not, that process has to take place for you to move forward, doesn't it?
Yes, and it's been said that grief has 5 steps, and they're not linear. It's not like something happens and you do this, 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 and this. But the first step is denial, and often we live in denial. Is this really happening? Mm-hmm. And there are ways of doing that. We can just get busy and pretend things are not going on. And then, of course, we can get angry. We could protest whatever the loss is, and we can stay stuck at any one of these steps. We can fall into a depression, and then we get to the place where we are bargaining maybe with God. If I do this, then will this go away? If it comes on a year, then I'll start this, and then finally accept it. But a loss does something to us, and hopefully I want the viewers to grow through loss and not become stuck through loss.
Yes. I know we have some people. Let me check, because this is so interesting. I want to make sure we don't miss anybody. Excuse me. Janet is here. Janet McHenry is here. Katie Rouse. Hello, ladies. How are you? So good to see you. There's so many different things we could say about this. One of them is that both of us have experienced deep loss. So when we say that you can come out the other side and love God even more after having gone through this process, we're not saying that lightly, are we?
No, we're not. Loss will change your theology. It will change
That's a great quote.
Belief about God, because I think I had this idea that if we serve God and we prayed, and all my kids, I have 4 children, they all know the Lord, losing a son to suicide and being a committed Christian didn't kind of ring true to me. I never said it out loud, but I never thought loss would be a part of our story. Mm-hmm. So I had to adjust what I believed about God. God didn't need to adjust who he was. I needed to adjust my belief system. Yes. And I think that loss will do that. It will change your belief system.
It surely will. It surely will. Robbie says, I'm so sorry to hear your story. And, excuse me, sending sympathy and encouragement to both of us. Thank you, Robbie. You have a good heart. Pardon me. I love the loss will change your theology. That's such a powerful quote, and mostly because it's true. I have had friends in the past who feel, whether we're talking about being a writer, a speaker, whether we're talking about being a successful business person, a great preacher, whatever your goal is, if you know God has assigned it to you, there is the inference that it will be successful. And then when they don't succeed, it completely turns their theology upside down.
Absolutely, especially when we're talking to a lot of writers. And I almost feel like I've gone to 3 writers' conferences. I almost feel like you need grief counselors there, because most of the people come to these conferences, they've spent time, God's called them to write. They get there, and most people don't get very good news. And so it's very, very difficult, because God has called you to do something, and then it doesn't turn out right. One thing, Patricia, that's really helped me is I like to find someone in the Bible that mimics my situation, or at least what I feel God's trying to teach me. And Joseph is a perfect person, because he had some dreams, just like we have dreams. And it went downhill for a while. He got sold by his brothers, thrown in the pit, then sold by his brothers. Then he's picked up by Potiphar, and he's doing well there. He's a slave, but he's still doing well there. And then Potiphar's wife hits on him. He says no. He runs. He gets blamed. So here he's doing the right thing. He gets blamed, and then he goes into prison. And so we think he's been in prison at least 10 years. And then he meets two fellow inmates, and he's running the show in the prison. Joseph is not a guy that just resigns himself. He's always gaining skills, and I think that's something we can learn too. Wherever our detours are, gain skills. Do whatever God wants you to do, because he's really in control. And then the two prisoners, he said, now when you get out of prison, because he foretold their dream, remember me, because the one guy got executed, the other guy got out of prison. Well, wouldn't you know it, he forgets about him. Mm-hmm. And so here Joseph thinks, this is my ticket out of prison. This guy, I told him to remember me. He doesn't remember them. People are, they're on with life. And I think in some of our losses, some of it has to do with people forgetting us, saying they're going to do something and then not doing it. So then Pharaoh does have a dream, and the guy goes, I think I remember someone. Probably only to save their necks, because Pharaoh wasn't a nice guy, and if they didn't interpret the dream, he'd probably get a whole new batch of people. So that's when Joseph finally gets out of the prison. But all this while, it looks like his dream is not coming to pass.
Yes. It's interesting that you mentioned that reference in the Bible, because our pastor talked about that very reference yesterday, and the fact that, excuse me, in the end, but it was years down the road, he not only saved his own family, but he saved the nation of Israel before they were a nation. It was just so compelling that it took years and years and years. And if bitterness or the blockade of grief, unresolved grief, any number of different things could have kept Joseph and can keep us from believing that what God said is true, no matter what's happening to us right now.
Yes, we can't change our belief in God when we look at our life. Patricia, I just got to share this quote with you because I just love it. It's by Joy Joffe. It says, a survivor is a person who, when knocked down, somehow knows how to stay down until the count of 9 and get up differently. The non-survivor gets up right away and gets hit again. So we want to be survivors. We might want to learn, perhaps, from whatever it was that, so to say, didn't go right, because there are lessons to be learned.
Yes. That's an important point that everybody knows, but then we have to come back and be reminded of that again. Christ does not waste our time. He's not being mean-spirited to us. He's taking care of us in a way that we don't yet recognize as such. Let me check and see. We've got some comments here. Sally Ferguson says, I love the thought that we can learn skills in every detour. That is a great quote, isn't it, Sally? Katie is here. Katie Rouse. She says she lost her son to a drug overdose. At first, all she could do was go before God in a stunned silence. She had prayed so much for her son. So she saw another side of God, a more complete and complex picture of God. We do these times of our life, we see him, we hear him. It's a super sensitive situation, isn't it? The smallest nuance we pick up on. Because we want hope. We want to have something to grab onto and believe that there can be a future after this horrible seemingly life-ending situation has taken place.
Right. There always is hope. And God is so tender to us during those difficult times. I remember when my son died, I had nothing in me. I was just devastated. I was tired. I was just emotionally spent. And God really did carry me through it. And so I got to know God in a way that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
Yes. And on the front end, that sounds very pious and very like, whatever. Anybody could say that. But when you've been through the fire, and you still say it.
And God is there. He really is there.
And viewers, this is not a traditional interview. I forgot to mention that. This is where Dee and I are talking, and you are welcome to take part of the conversation. We're talking today specifically to serve you. We have an original and a previous interview, and I'll share the link above when I share all of these links to that initial interview where we're talking about her writing, her speaking, and so forth. And she'll be back to help us further. But right now, we're just trying to go through this process with her as a professional counselor, specifically one who deals in death and loss. Excuse me, grief and loss. Can I just ask you some
Go ahead.
questions that are sort of random?
Yeah.
How can we tell the difference, Dee, in deep disappointment, depression, and grief?
Depression could be an outcome of grief, but it's different than grief. Grief has to deal more with loss. Depression is more of a clinical diagnosis where there's loss of appetite, sleep is affected. Grief is due to a loss, and grief needs to be processed, because if we don't process the feelings of grief, they will leach out. And that is the unprocessed feelings are the thing that gets us stuck. And a lot of people actually do have a lot of unprocessed grief. Perhaps they grew up in a child of divorce, and they go into adulthood, and losses can kind of compound. And if we've not, I deal with a lot of other things besides grief. And sure enough, I'll get someone in my counseling practice, and they'll say, "I lost my dad to suicide." And I'll say, "Did you cry?" I think I did. And the losses kind of compound; they don't go away.
Yes, yes. Mm. And how do we know if we're in grief? Are there signs that we're in grief that we would know as the person who's suffering?
A lot of time, well, I would say unresolved grief is just when you lose hope for the future. You just feel stuck. That is a sign that something is wrong. Our emotions are signals. They're like the red light on a car. Mm-hmm. I know we had this old car in Dallas when my husband went to seminary, and when we were moving soon, and when we were just going to bury the car. So the red engine light came on, and I said, "Bob, what should we do?" And he said, just keep driving it, and because we're moving soon. So I put a 3x5 card in front of the light because I didn't want to see the light. And then I was hearing this sound, and I just turned the radio up. Was this fixing the problem? This was not. These were signals to tell me the car's then it finally lost front wheel drive, and you kind of need front wheel drive to drive. So we got rid of it then.
And Christ built these emotions into us. They are part of who we are. To deny them is unhealthy, isn't it?
Right. They're actually just signals. And you come before God and you say, "Lord, what is going on?" when you feel stuck. Just recently I felt stuck, and I went before the Lord, and there was still some grief issues 11 years later that I needed to process about my son's death. So just ask God what is going on. But when you feel stuck, when you feel hopeless, it's good to have someone. Grief needs to be processed with other people. So find someone trusted. I know a lot of times for writers, maybe they write this book, and sales for most writers aren't so good. Most writers sell under 1,000 books. And people say, "Well, if you just reach one person with your book, then it's worth it." Well, publishers don't think that. So, and I heard that too, and I thought, if I just reach one person, I'd rather just talk to them than just write this whole darn book. So, anyway, I think that just to process that you do feel like a failure, you do feel like it is a loss, and not to live in the denial and go, "Well, okay," and maybe God is using that to change your direction. One story, Patricia, that really has been encouraging to me is I do some work with New Life Live Ministries with Stephen Arterburn. And he tells this story. Now, Steve is the person that has started Women of Faith. Everyone's heard of Women of Faith, and I don't know how many women went through it, but lots and lots of women. But what a lot of people don't know is that, and it was actually Steve that started Women of Faith. So a man started Women of Faith.
I'm hearing you. I'm trying to process that.
Yeah, anyway. But before that, Steve led seminars for women, and he rented out, I remember he tells the story, he rented out this huge place somewhere in Chicago, and I think there was just 100 people there, which was a total flop. So he learned from that experience. There's one thing that Steve cannot do is run seminars, but God can. And so sometimes what we think is a failure, it's really God causing us to be more dependent on him and to realize if you want the dream to come true, you're going to have to do it. So God is in control, and that's one thing we need to realize is that sometimes we can intertwine our ministry and our mission with our relationship with God, and those two things are separate.
Yes. As we can lose one and not have to lose the other unless we get it mixed up there.
Right.
Just a moment ago, you said that we would need to make that happen, but you meant give God control and permission to make that happen. Is that what you meant?
Yes.
Okay. Let me check and see.
However he wants to do it. Even the children of Israel, they left Egypt. They didn't go the direct route. They had to spend some time in the wilderness. But they spent a lot of extra time in the wilderness, and that's what we want to avoid. We don't want to be disobedient and spend extra time in the wilderness, but there is a wilderness experience for most of us.
I wish it was different, but it's just not.
Yes. He builds a lot of character in the wilderness. When things don't go well is when we grow the most.
Yes. Even though I know that to be an absolute fact, I still reject it, on the face value because it's just such an unpleasant thought. But if we're obeying him and doing what he said, that doesn't necessarily mean success, but he always rewards obedience in the way that seems right to him. Do you agree with that?
Yes, he's in control of the outcome. He's in control of the outcome.
What about how can we move from loss? It's not as you said earlier, it's not a linear path. How can we move from loss to grief and going through the grief process to then finally healing? What can we expect if we've never contemplated this process before entering this zone?
Well, again, you can expect it not to be linear. It's not a straight line. It's kind of a squiggly line. You go in and out, and things, you feel some uncomfortable emotions. And so one thing you can expect, it's going to take longer than you thought. Yes. Grief always takes longer than you thought. I know people will come in after losing someone or after a divorce, and they'll say, it's been a year, why aren't I better? And the more important something is to you, of course, the longer it's going to take to heal from. Just if we had open heart surgery, and that's what some of these losses are, open heart surgery, our loss of a dream that we put a lot of time and effort into, when it doesn't go well, like in the case of your business, it's like open heart surgery. That takes time to heal. You just don't get the surgery, leave the hospital, and run a half marathon. No. It takes time to heal.
Absolutely. About, 6 or 8 years ago, the Lord released me from a ministry that I had been serving abuse survivors for 30 years.
Wow.
Informally, no degree, just he matched us together and, in everyday life. And I served them, and really, I know that I made a difference in a lot of people's lives, and it was very gratifying.
I'm sure you did.
Then he said, I was working on my blog one day. This was years ago. And I thought, Lord, I'm doing the same thing that I've always done before, but there's I'm not getting any traction. What's going on? Give me some insight. And he said, nobody else is working on this with you, even me.
Oh, oh, hmm,
I understood that he just released me from a ministry I thought I would die serving that group of people.
yes,
And he gave me a year and a half to grieve. I couldn't even articulate it to my husband. It ran so deep.
yes,
Um, um, but he was kind, and in the moments of the darkest moments or the most confusing moments, sometimes it's a pat on the hand, sometimes it's the Holy Spirit on your shoulder, a song on the radio, a Bible verse that you've read 5 million times, and all of a sudden it jumps off the page and it smacks you in the face in a loving way, if that's possible. He does not leave us alone, does he?
no. And the Psalms are a great place to go. I know when I've gone through different heartaches, I just underline verses in the Psalms that I love, and then I'll write them in my journal. And pretty much the whole book of Psalms is underlined. And then I date it whenever I put a little date when it ministers to me. So going to God's word and let him directly comfort you.
Yes, yes, yes. And there are times that going into his word is the last thing that we want to do, but that's our pain talking, not our spirit, right?
Right, right. Well, God's word gives hope. And so we need to go to God's word because it gives us hope.
Let's see if we have anything else. I'm sorry?
It gives us perspective.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's excellent, excellent. Last question for today. Is it possible? No, actually I have two more. What are the symptoms of ungrieved losses? And that you may have already answered that, but to ask it more specifically, how you, or have you already really addressed that? If it's an ungrieved loss and I can't look into the future and everything is a void, then is it likely that I'm suffering from grieving, even if I didn't realize it?
Okay, I have Norm Wright's another guy I like to quote from. This is a quote from him, and I think it perfectly answers your question. When we don't grieve properly, unresolved reactions and feelings lead to a higher level of discomfort, and those unresolved issues continue to prevent us from living life to the fullest. Mm-hmm. So when we have a higher level of discomfort and we're not living life to the fullest, then these are symptoms perhaps that we need to go back and look at some grief issues and work backwards.
Okay. Let me check and see if we have anything. We're almost closing out. Katie says, that's true. We learn obedience through suffering. Oh, how I wish it weren't so. It takes the Lord, for me, I'm a slow learner. I kick and fight against the goads, and it took him a long time to help me understand that the fastest road through the darkness, as hard as it was, to acquiesce and let him set the tone, the path, the pace, everything that needed to be done. Staying on the outside and fighting it was not going to benefit me at all at any time.
I have a blog post that shows a tunnel, and it's like you go through this tunnel and it's dark and it's the same and you just can't wait to get out, but you need to go through it. Stopping does not help. You're not out when you stop. So,
yeah. So true.
You got to get out of the tunnel.
Let's see. I would like to, if that blog post is handy, I'd like to add it to the list of links after the program. Anything else you'd like to leave us with? We're writers, speakers, we're creatives. So our emotions and our feelings, excuse me, we're in control of them, and they're not in control of us, Lord willing. But still, they're a little bit more sensitized than other people, perhaps.
Which is good.
That's part of the call, isn't it?
Yes.
And we're at the mouth of the tunnel, or we've stopped in the tunnel, and we can't see the light. It's not visible. And you're saying keep moving, keep trusting, don't give up. What else?
In control, I'd say take the next step. Just keep taking the next step forward. You may not know what God, when I lost my son, I didn't know I'd be talking about grief and loss. That wasn't my long range plan, but I just kept taking the next step and God kept leading. So just take the next step and you will get to the light, but it feels kind of crazy when you're in the midst of it.
And if that's going on with you, viewers, whether you're watching live or the replay, I pray also that for you that Christ would surround you with people, maybe one person, maybe many people who support you, and they're not trying to drag you through the tunnel. That they comfort you and or support you, or hopefully both.
Right.
Let's check one more time and see if we have anything else going on. I think that we're good to go. All right. I hope that this has been an informative program for you. Dee's going to come back and speak with us periodically. It don't want to always be on this topic, but she is gifted in this area, and we want to. This program is not just light and air. It's not just entertainment and information. We've got to get down to the guts of the problem. We've got to deal with what's actually happening in our lives so that we can go to that next level of freedom, and that we can be even more, our message and our soul can be even more effective for Christ. There's lots for us to do to grow together and individually. I pray that this program has helped you, and we know I so appreciate you taking the time, Dee.
Oh, well, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here, Patricia. You're just so fun. So fun. That laugh is great. I listened to you on the way home from my practice, and because I can't view it live a lot of times, but
my daughters, we were in a department store years and years ago when they were little, and we had separated, but they were old enough that I wasn't scared or fearful of them because they were together plus. And I was talking to a friend, and then they sort of got turned around and couldn't find me. And they eventually located me. And they said, Mama, we could hear you. We knew where you were because we could hear your laugh ringing through the store.
Right.
I've done nothing to deserve it. I appreciate it. It seems to be pleasant to people. We all have memories. If that's a memory that they have of me laughing, that's a good memory for me. Viewers, thank you so much for being with us. This is Marketers on a Mission, number 151. Are you feeling hopeless about the future? You may be grieving the past. Tomorrow, singer-songwriter Almeda Bradshaw joins me. She's going to share how important brand specificity is and how to keep our online message fresh without getting overwhelmed. She has lots of online responsibilities, and she's able to keep it fresh and keep it fun. We're here every weekday to serve you. We're here exclusively for you at 12 Pacific, 3 Eastern. We want to help you learn the craft of writing from professional writers, and then we also want to help broaden your scope, serve you and the needs that you have in your life that may be keeping you from experiencing everything that God has for you. So we're here to serve you. We're going to start again tomorrow with Almeda, and thank you very much, Dee. We both say goodbye to you, and I'll add the links in just a few minutes. If you give me a moment, I'll add all the links. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.